Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Visiting Artist Lecture series of the spring of 2022. The next lecture in the series will be March 29th with Cami Staros. Please visit the Art and Art History website for more information on this historic program and all upcoming presentations. This presentation will be an artist talk followed by a Q&A moderated by me. You can type in your questions to the right of the video on YouTube during or immediately after the artist talk. I am Cody Norton. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm an MFA candidate in sculpture and post-studio practices here at the University of Colorado Boulder. I'm thrilled to introduce artist and educator Cara Jaye. Cara Jaye is a multifaceted artist, combining conventional drawing, traditional and alternative photographic processes, and various printmaking techniques together with painting and collage. She considers drawing her first and primary medium. She loves drawing for its immediacy and its intimacy of marks placed directly on the page. Cara Jaye was born in Solana Beach, California, and now resides in Bellingham, Washington. She is a professor in art at the Western Washington University. She obtained her Master's of Fine Arts here at the University of Colorado Boulder. She's exhibited work nationally and internationally with some recent shows including Gallery Gwoon, South Korea, Punch Gallery, Seattle, Washington, Art West, Seattle, University of Colorado Boulder, Gray Matter Gallery in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Coop Gallery in Nashville, Tennessee, and the Orange County Center for Contemporary Art in California. Please join me and give a warm welcome to Cara Jaye.
Thank you. Thank you, Cody, and thank you all for inviting me to present my work here at the University of Colorado at Boulder. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I am speaking to you from the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Lummi Nation and the Nooksack tribe, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. I especially wish to thank Melanie Yazzie. Melanie Yazzie is a terrific colleague and a great friend. She's been a brilliant artist guide to me and so many others over the course of many years, and I feel so grateful to call her a friend. I also wish to thank Lucy Lepard for being an inspiring teacher when I was a graduate student there at CU Boulder, as she opened my eyes to so many topics, including her book that was fresh in mind when I was a graduate student there, The Lure of the Local, Senses of Place in a Multi-Censored Society. I find it touching, interesting, and also ironic that I've been invited to speak in this online format to you at all at CU Boulder, the place of my former home and school, a place that I have so many attachments to. This opportunity to speak to you today has brought to mind how much has changed and how the COVID pandemic has brought new meaning to a multi-centered society. The Lure of the Local is a book that weaves together a vast array of information, including cultural studies, art, and geography via explorations of multiple senses of place. It was unimaginable when she wrote this book in the late 90s that this online space would recenter our lives and reorganize our ideas of place. In my presentation, I'm going to cover 4 groups of work. And my work is diverse, and the visual range may seem at odds with each other. Themes cross over various topics, media usage, and formats, as I'm drawn to a variety of materials, processes, topics, and ways of creating. The thread that holds these pieces together is the engaging of the natural world through time, through my body, and through this life. I engage in a contemporary feminist viewpoint, a viewpoint that was encouraged to me by my teachers, peers, and mentors early on. The work begins with myself and slowly enlarges to include more people, more partners, collaborators, and engage more completely with the larger community and world. I'm going to start with this group of work titled Insect Collection. I began this work in 1999, and I have continued to work with it through the present day. It is a satisfying series, something I can come back to again and again. I enjoy the format, the immense possibilities, and the repetition. I enjoy the tedious nature of this work that is slow and meditative in the making. For me, insects are emblematic of collecting, a cataloging of types and body parts. Each piece is made up of a photographic silver gelatin print that has been embroidered, mounted onto canvas, and painted with my body's blood. In all of the photographs, I act as both the artist and the model. As the figure moves alternately between these two roles, she acts as a pendulum between active creative subject and passive object. Embroidery is often associated with craft or handiwork, and in the time I grew up, it was traditionally considered women's work. I'm going to talk about the process of making these pieces. So these are traditional silver gelatin prints shot on medium format film. And after I have the photographic layer, I contemplate which insect image I feel best fits the image. Next, I embroider the insect body on top of the image of the figure. I have to pierce holes into the photograph in order to embroider it. And as the stitches break through this perfect surface of the paper and the skin of the figure, this act denies the image a flawlessness that is usually taken for granted in photography. It can also feel like a very destructive act, personally destructive, because I am repeatedly piercing an image of myself. Then I fix these onto panels, stretching them like canvases over canvas with rabbit skin glue. And then finally, I use a paint of my own blood to complete the image. Blood symbolizes intimacy and the vehicle of life. It also speaks of shame, loss, inheritance, identification, violence, and death. I like to think that the use of my body's blood as paint fills and fulfills the insect's body, thus layering the piece with another type of portrait. The combination of blood and stitches are reminiscent of reconstructive surgery and further emphasize the idea of perfecting body parts, of changing the grotesque into the beautiful into the grotesque, and the whole into scrutinized, fragmented components. The insects and their Latin names, a system of taxonomic hierarchy invented by Cara, are realized by scratching into the surface of the photo paper and staining the etched surface with blood. The nomenclature alludes to the rigor associated with medicine and the classification of natural phenomenon. Insects are emblematic of collecting, a cataloging of types and body parts. They're both strange and beautiful to my eye. They amaze with their abilities, their size, strength, tenacity, and fragility. Insect typology is vast, and their common names are socially revealing. Coupled with the image of the body, they speak of anthropomorphism and reveal much about how we view their actions and their activities. Names like virgin, twisted, American, flesh, etc. enter into their common names and inspire much of my combinations. These pieces also address the way the nude figure has and continues to be viewed through both historical and contemporary imagery. How should the female figure be portrayed? Who is viewing the body, and for what purpose? My work draws from and plays with academic figure studies of the 19th century and early 20th century, like idealized or abstracted nudes where the figure signifies the natural. Oftentimes likened to an object, as in this piece by Edward Weston, where we have this very erotic looking pepper, and a woman's body was often shown in a similar light, becoming a spectacle and a site of desire or projection. For me, the insect collection marries these ideas and themes. I take control of the image, but I am and will continue to be influenced by historical imagery of the past. The work has inherent contradictions, including self-objectification, self-fetishism, as well as construction and conception of the self. And as I've matured, the work has evolved. My body's changed. Sometimes I'm less confident. Sometimes I try to hide areas of the figure with the insect. Sometimes I embrace the imperfection. And it's matured with this series. This is a pretty, I started this series over 20 years ago, and it's continued to evolve and develop, and I look forward to continuing it. It's something that I come back to again and again in between other pieces, other projects, other activities that I do. I want to talk about some significant influences that I have. And one of those influences includes George Woodman, who is a former teacher of mine when I was a grad student at CU Boulder, and also his daughter, Francesca Woodman, who was deceased long before I was a student there. Abigail Solomon Godot has written about Francesca Woodman's work that the relationship constructed in the photographer's work is not between the real woman and her image, but between the spectator and the two equally unreal images. So these have had just lasting impact on my work in a variety of ways. Another long-standing influence is the artist Kiki Smith, who I've continued to just really appreciate for a variety of ways, for her exploration of the body in its most intimate functions, its membranes and fluids, and ultimately the way she talks about the body as a whole. I really appreciate the meandering and non-directional nature of her investigations and her ability to define the female subject on its own terms. As she has matured, I love how she is embracing multiple aspects of the religious and the mythological body, the decorative and the feminine, nature and the cosmos. So those are some of my my influences. I have a lot of artist influences, and like most people, some come and go, but these are just a few enduring influences. Switching gears, I want to talk about a collaborative project that I started in 2007. This is a project called Crossover or Cruce de Vias, a collaborative exchange project that Miguel Rivera and I began in 2007. So with this work, these collaborative pieces, I was in the US and Miguel at the time was in Mexico. I was working in Bellingham, Washington, and at the time Miguel was working in Guanajuato, Mexico. Crossover started with the two of us, but since then has grown to involve many artists from all over the world. In the beginning, Miguel and I traveled between our home countries to create these layered works on paper, which use various printmaking and photography techniques, as well as a lot of collage, digital imagery, drawing, and painting. The images have been manipulated, layered, and placed in combination with rendered drawings and prints in an environment that conveys a sacred space. So this previous image is a collaborative image with one of my images and some of Miguel's images all combined. This is some of my own work done as pinhole photographs created in a modified Holga camera with a Polaroid back, scanned and digitally printed. So these are the kind of images, or some of the images, that I was passing on to Miguel. The project began as an experimental art project where Miguel and I were exchanging artwork back and forth between the US and Mexico. This collaboration required an unusual letting go of the work, as paperworks were created and then sent to the artist's studio to be added onto by another's hand. These mixed media pieces use layers and multiple viewpoints to create dialogue about crossing borders and nationalities, and to bridge differences while sending work across actual borders. For Rivera, the materials that are used serve as metaphors for the passage of time, memory, and the human condition. The layering of the surfaces functions as a contemporary device. Placing images in this manner helps to reconstruct, examine, and reinvent Catholic iconography. At the same time, layering of these icons creates a double edge or ambiguity of related themes. Our visual and conceptual choices swirled around topics of borders and territory, personal stories, and myths. I began hand-stitching tufts of coyote fur into compositions, directly referencing the animal for its prevalence throughout the US and Mexico, and its ability to adapt to most urban and suburban environments for survival, while disregarding human boundaries to do so. Miguel uses the microscopic imagery of viruses and diseases like H1N1 and HIV, layering and repeating their removed, abstractly beautiful structures across multiple works. Like the coyote, the viruses suggest proliferation, indifference to borders, and a knack for adaptation. On a side note, I feel like this seems even more present than ever with our current global pandemic. So we subsequently traded work back and forth by mail over several years between my home studio in Bellingham, Washington, and Rivera's in Mexico, and later at his new home in Kansas City. Ownership of the work became shared and exchanged between the two of us. It did require a great amount of letting go of the work, including the use and combination of material, and most dramatically, the final outcome. Interestingly enough, I think we both found this process of working and giving up control immensely satisfying and freeing. Although it was scary to start something I really liked and then completely let it go, not knowing what would happen to it or if I would ultimately see it again, it was also really refreshing to not worry about the image so much. I knew these starts were not complete or finished by any stretch of the imagination, so it was fun to get them started and then pack them up. It was also exciting to receive a tube or package of images or prints, unroll them, flatten them out, and then decide what I was going to do with them. It is much easier to get started when you are responding to something already on the page than it is to start with the blank page. It is also really fun to look at something someone else has begun and decide what you're going to do to it. What does it need? And we eventually decided to open this conversation up that we'd been enjoying for so many years with other artists who had like-minded discourses. So in the summer of 2012, we enlarged the collaboration and brought it to Kansas City, where Miguel was then and now still lives. So we brought in Patricia Villalobos Echeverria, a Nicaraguan American artist working in Kalamazoo, Michigan, Melanie Yazzie of the Saltwater Clan and Bitterwater Clan of the Diné people of northeastern Arizona, and as you know, head of printmaking at CU. Michael Shonoff, an artist and curator from Kansas City, Missouri, and I all joined us in residence at the Kansas City Artists Coalition to create collaborative works for Crossover KCAC. And we spent a week there working together, having a really fantastic time, making a lot of work, and showing that at the Kansas City Artists Coalition. So we had a show there, and we created a fantastic number of works. It was really empowering and just a lot of fun, bringing together all these people, working simultaneously, etc. And So after that success, Miguel decided to seek out another avenue for this. So he decided to bring it to Buenos Aires, Argentina, at the Proyecto ACE Foundation, where he had previously completed a residency. And in this iteration of the work, it was really just Miguel working with some new artists. So at this point, he worked with director Alicia Candiani and master printmaker Adriana Maracci to devise a call for entry for emerging artists to participate in a micro residency at Proyecto ACE. Ultimately, the session included 27 artists from Argentina, Mexico, the USA, Canada, South Africa, England, Colombia, Germany, and South Korea. Artists began by selecting plates produced by Rivera and were given the challenge to create a bridge between their own ideas and processes and the original images. And here you can see him working remotely. So he's probably really good at this by now, since he started doing it in 2013, but working across borders between Kansas City and Buenos Aires. A great deal of work came out of this from all these different 27 artists, a really fabulous body of work. And here's all of the people involved. So then in 2015, I decided to again unite some of these participants from previous crossover sessions for a collaborative chapter here at my home school of Western Washington University. And we set up a dedicated work lab space within the exhibition. So at this time, we had Miguel Rivera, myself, Melanie Yazzie, Patricia Villalobos Echeverria. We invited John Fedorov, who is here in Washington, and Alicia Candiani came from Buenos Aires. So we had some new people, and we had a exhibition curated in the gallery by the curator Amy Kalupka. So we set it up a dedicated work lab space within the exhibition, complete with a printing press, work tables, and materials for artists to develop new works on site. And this lab allowed viewers a glimpse into the space of the collaboration. The work was always changing and continually evolving. Here you can see myself working in the gallery, and on the right is John Fedorov and Patricia. We created individual works, kind of clouds of works, combined things. Here's just a few images from the exhibition. And it was kind of a continually evolving space, making new works while we're in the space, adding to work on the gallery walls, adding on from previous sessions, and inviting viewers in to see all of that happening in the space of the gallery. So this collaborative sense of play started to come into my individual work as well in about 2010 or so, after I unexpectedly became a single parent. This work is called Pilot On, Dramatic Play Area, and involved integrating my new harried life as a mother into my working practice. So this work was inspired by my daughter Coco and her motivational charts and drawings when she was a young child. The abstract works on paper are created with ink, paint, serigraphy, and digital prints. I'm inspired by the child's marks and choices when constructing an image, as well as the visuals found abundantly in children's toys and playthings. And being a parent really opened me up to a whole new world of visuals, from the toys we choose and offer to our children to the kinds of images they draw and select for themselves. The work also alludes to my own feelings of inundation, a general sense of being overwhelmed, and the tricky power play between parent and child. The resultant images both subscribe to the idea of childhood as sweet and innocent, but also acknowledge that it is often messy, overwrought, and sometimes scary. So this is a little bit about the process for these pieces. So most of the pieces began practically and somewhat unintentionally. So for example, when I was trying to instill good habits in my daughter, toilet training, hand washing, etc., I would draw a toilet, a pair of hands washing, maybe a toothbrush, and usually post that on the wall. And each night, Coco got to put stickers on the page when she completed her nighttime routine. So here you can see what a resultant image like that would look like. Here's a second version. And I actually became really intrigued by how she built up and heavily layered the page with stickers. I found the approach to be developmental, tactile, and really quite foreign to an adult sensibility. I was really surprised by just how these things got layered and piled upon. Also, the images can be overly cute and saccharine sweet, and so that was also really a big part of the piece. So when these charts were completed, they would be scanned, and I would print them as archival digital prints, and then build on top of them with new layers of paint as I added and edited out much of the bombardment of visual display in the original. I've also created larger works on paper made entirely of paint that are influenced and inspired by my daughter's early drawings and collages, as well as collaborative drawings that we sometimes would create together. I'm interested in the childlike perspective. And in these works, the areas are strewn with dolls, toys, princesses, trucks, and farm animals, along with gushing sweets, cupcakes, ice cream, and tea sets. The work explores the images that proliferate in childhood, from the toys we choose to make and offer to our children, to the kinds of images they draw and select for themselves. Some of the pieces use print processes such as silkscreen or relief on top of the digital print. Most of the works are made by directly drawing or painting on top of the prints. And in these pieces, I'm just really fascinated by the child's hand, how the marks are applied, how the images and stickers are piled one on top of another or scattered, sometimes hovering in the margins and in the borders, breaking really conventional rules of composition and art making. The building up and layering of marks and stickers appealed to me, and these odd compositions, I just felt like I could never have come up with this myself. So it was somewhat eye-opening and inspiring for me. And as I was trying to grapple with parenthood, I just felt like rolling it all together made sense for me. Editing is a big tool in the process, and eliminating much of the noise and information to something that is more cohesive and more digestible. A few more works from this group to share with you. This is Pink Tea Party. Okay, and so now I want to share with you even more current work. As I've slowly phased out of those pieces as my daughter's grown and no longer working that way or visualizing that way. And I became more aware of a broader community, and I wanted to look um, at our environment and think about the land and the water in an inverted perspective in the wake of global climate change and widespread plastic pollution. So we all know that we live in a time when our world is changing rapidly, and many people do not know what they can do to address the many environmental challenges we have to face. So this series of work seeks to investigate these problems and scenarios being played out by our human impact on the natural environment. Witnessing these events in person and in the media brings with it a sense of individual guilt and culpability. While I've been working on these issues from the vantage point of my home in Washington State, these are global issues and can be seen everywhere with changing place names. These large-scale multi-panel pieces investigate issues such as flooding, sea level rise, storm surge, and plastic pollution. The work is made of monoprint or cyanotype and monoprint in combination. Cyanotype, if you don't know, is a light-sensitive photographic emulsion that was developed in 1842 during the early stages of photographic history. And this piece and another coming up is called King Tide. So king tides are exceptionally high tides that happen several times a year. And with these come flooding in coastal areas. Since king tides lift the water level higher than a typical high tide, they offer a glimpse into the future of what we might expect with sea level rise. Average daily water levels are rising along with the oceans. As a result, high tides are reaching higher and extending further inland than in the past. King tides preview how sea level rise will affect coastal places. As time goes by, the water level reached now during a king tide will be the water level reached at a high tide on an average day. So here's the piece again, king tide number 1, and it's a combination of cyanotype and monoprint. So in making these pieces, I'm painting the cyanotype directly on the paper and then finding areas of connection and then using monoprint to bind them together into a more cohesive composition and add additional imagery. So in this, I'm illustrating the power of the Earth's force, the force of the ocean, and how these man-made devices, these bulwarks and things in the parks are just going to get lost by the power of the tide. This one is called King Tide 2, and again, this is on multi-panels of paper. Again, it's cyanotype and monoprint. These are 22 by 30-inch sheets, so I tend to work with similar size sheets, so they're so I can combine them in various ways. This is titled Underwater, and this is a similar yet earlier work that really got me involved in making the monoprints. I was interested in the accumulation of plastic objects in our lives and as they accumulate in the water. And I was hearing about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and thinking about all the plastic in my life, especially the children's toys and other fun, colorful objects. So this is also made out of 22 by 30-inch panels. They're obviously come together in a large grid on the wall, so a very large space, and just all made out of individual pieces of monoprint film, running through the press in different combinations until I can get everything layered and working together. This is an earlier. This is a somewhat earlier work done around the same time called "Water on the Mountain," and it shows a shifting view from the mountains through the agricultural lands of the Skagit Valley to the Salish Sea. The theme of the image is the snow-rain balance. So, with reduced snowpack in the mountains, water is not stored and released slowly over time, but instead a greater and faster release of water flows immediately into the river and creates a much stronger likelihood of flooding. And so this is another sort of dramatic weather occurrence that is one of these kind of larger events that we'll notice as part of global climate change. And I know that you all have experienced this kind of event there in Boulder County. And then plastic is also much on my mind. And this was just a little card that someone gave to me. I was doing a kind of an ocean cleanup here in my own county, and I was handed this card about "you are drinking plastic," and so I was already concerned, but it was interesting to think about this, about how plastic has now like infiltrated all of our water, and we're drinking and consuming microplastics. And so I really wanted to do some work really thinking about the breakdown of plastic and the plastic in general. So I created this piece called "You Are Drinking Plastic," looking at the proliferation of plastics, especially single-use plastics such as shopping bags and food packaging. A recent study found that 94% of sampled municipal water in the US contained microplastics, and one dump truck of plastic waste enters the ocean every minute. So this piece is made in part by monoprinting plastic bags, plastic waste, and packaging. And again, it's done on top of cyanotype. So I've also using plastic bags and plastic elements in the cyanotype layer, and then again in the printing of the piece. And then finally, I've been working on this series called a Pre-Emptive Memorial for Single-Use Plastics. This is that, and specifically the dome lid. It's a combination relief print combined with cyanotype. And I'm working on this series of preemptive memorials as a kind of a modest hope for humans finding more sustainable containers and more sustainable products for everyday living. Trying to get away from plastics in my own life is really difficult, I'm sure, because it's become such a part of our everyday world. And although I don't know that I know how to invent a more sustainable product, I'm sure there are people out there who can. And so this is my sort of modest hope that in the future, we will remember, like, yeah, remember when we used to use Ziploc bags, or remember when we used to have cups with dome lids that would hold in your whipped cream. Currently, our wild places are being eroded and fouled with plastic waste and particles that are adversely affecting wild habitats and wildlife as well as human habitats. So I wanted to address those things in this piece. This is the final piece with all of my mini images for you tonight. The strawberry clamshell box. I have two kind of versions of this print, one with a cyanotype background and one without it. This is a combination cyanotype and screen printed piece. So I know that I've shown you a great diversity of work tonight, and it does range, but it makes sense through my life as I've started thinking more about the self, becoming more involved with community, and then finally moving to the environment. I am still working on the insect collection pieces, as that is kind of a, a body of work that I like to come back to again in between other larger projects. Thank you.
Amazing work. Thank you so much, Cara. For anyone watching, if you have questions, go ahead and post them now. And I think just to make the first comment, I think your work is absolutely beautiful. And, you discuss as artists, we are, we can't solve everything when it comes to climate change, but we can be advocates to be able to push to further the discussion for climate change and what is happening in our world around us. We're definitely the people that are going to be out there showing people what is happening. And I think you're doing a fantastic job of doing that. And I really admire you and your work, and you're doing amazing work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cody.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We have our first question. Do you ever have any issues with using blood as a material?
Yes, it does provoke a strong reaction for people. Some people become somewhat threatened by it. Some people love it. It's difficult to work with for a couple of reasons. So it's not an easy thing to work with. Whenever people are feel threatened by it or worried about it, I try to just let them know that everything is very sealed and contained because when I complete the pieces, I have them framed. They're behind glass. They're in kind of a shadow box, and so there's really not any sort of inherent hazard to the piece. Some people, I think, are drawn to it because it seems interesting to them. But it can be difficult to work with also. There are issues of sometimes it's difficult to get it to adhere to the surface. I have to get the blood, which is another thing. So that can be a kind of a hurdle sometimes. So I've found really what I've done is I've found healthcare people that I either befriend or somehow in my life, and I try to get them to draw blood and then give it to me in a test tube, and then I kind of stockpile it, I guess I should say, and try to keep it around so I can use it when I want to. So I have it in a special place in the fridge. Guess just one of those weird things that artists do. So there's a variety of issues. Sometimes just getting it to adhere to the surface, I've found more ways of getting that to work also. But it's not like a regular paint. It doesn't have any binder. It doesn't blend the same way. But usually I can make it work pretty well. And I've lately started using a clear gesso, and that helps on the works. And then also all the embroidery helps to kind of just enact a kind of a binding surface for the material, sort of keeps it together. And then sometimes I've used shellac. So some of the pieces are really shiny, and those ones I'll have like a layer of shellac over the top.
Amazing. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah.
So, I don't know if that's too much information. I hope not, but
no, that's absolutely what we need to hear. I think it was something that was burning the back of most of our minds while you're just discussing it. Another question that just came in: is there any specific significance in your decision to use particular insects over your photographs?
Yes, I mean that I guess is some part the fun part, or one of the fun parts for me, because there are just so many insects. the category of insects is this vast category, and they have really interesting visuals. And so I always just kind of have ideas of like, oh yeah, I really like, I want to do something with this one, but sometimes I have to find the right photographic image to marry it with, because I want it to work with the image of the figure that I'm using. The name, as I mentioned in the lecture, the name is important to me too, a little bit, because some of the insect names have, they just have really peculiar common names as well as like their Latin names. So, um, you know, there's all these names that I think talk a lot about, of like just things from the past, like here's a long-toed water beetle, like just things about their bodies. I think that it's interesting that some of the insects are virgins or queens, ladies, or giants. So I feel like there's just a lot of fun stuff in there, and then it's really just a opportunity when I find the right one to marry with the right photograph.
Amazing, yeah. Let's see, we have some other questions. So we have another question asking, could you speak more on how you move between your different series and how they influence each other, or even if they do influence each other once you jump between the series? Because I know you have some series that have been long lasting throughout the years, but some series that were very short.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really just followed the course of my life to a large extent. So the insect collection, I don't know that I knew I would be working on it this long when I started it. So I had been doing some previous work where I was using myself in photographs and working with like wings, and doing some interesting work. But I started, I don't know, a lot of people thought it had to do with angels, and I was not wanting to go there so much. And I think at that point I decided to start working with insects, because they really didn't seem like they could be construed as angels. And then I don't know, I just kind of came up with this sort of format, and it just is a rich vein that I fell into and have kept going for a long time. So the thing that's nice about it is that it's something I can come back to. So I'll be working on something else, and then in between other projects, it's something I can always kind of come back to. So there have been times when I do a lot of those pieces in a year, and there'll be times where I don't do as many. And so sometimes it goes on like a little bit of a hiatus, and then I'll come back to it.
Absolutely.
And then, I think there's just other points in my life, like this series with my daughter. That was just all happening, and I felt so immersed in it. And it just seemed like I was just like, these are like, wow, these are like really so weird. Like, I just was like, what is she doing? Like, these are so weird. And then I was like, these are cool. Like, these things are kind of cool. So, but that was such a specific period of time, as she's grown. Now she's 14, and I'm not really doing those pieces anymore, because they don't really make sense that much. However, they do have a certain a certain kind of audience that likes them. And so I am actually like showing some of those right now at the Seattle Art Museum, and they really like that work. So I'm thrilled to show them in the gallery there, in the Sam Gallery. And yeah, but it is a bit of a conundrum, because I do think, like, should I make some new pieces in that work? But it kind of, I feel like that's not what's happening in my life anymore. So it seems like it might be a bit forced. So, yeah, so I think it's kind of interesting. There are some artists that really stick with a very consistent work throughout their whole career. And I have in the past thought like, oh, that's definitely not me, and maybe that's really my problem.
Mhm.
Maybe I would have had more success if I had just been, because I think some people are like, wait, what? Like whose work is this? If it looks
Yeah.
so different. But I did come to a realization that I just don't think I can make the same thing all the time. Like I just have a lot of interests, and so that's why I do really like to combine medias, and sometimes I'm a printmaker, sometimes I'm a photographer, sometimes I'm a drawer. I mean, I am mostly a two-dimensional person, so there's that. But yeah, so I think it's just kind of following the course of my life, being involved with communities and groups, and as I evolve, the work evolves in its own.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I feel like a lot of us artists are the same way, that it's hard to focus on one thing for so long, but you can see the bridges and gaps between the different crossovers in your different series and projects.
Mhm.
We have another question from Danny W. They said that I'm so enamored with the insect series and the Pre-Emptive memorial of single-use plastic. I find these centered compositions in both series striking. Have you ever considered the effects of climate collapse with insect populations as as an issue to approach in your work? Seems like there's an interesting crossover, especially considering the presence of how much vulnerability that is in the insect series.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Danny. Really great comment. Um, I I should think about bringing those things together, and I have thought a lot about collapsing bee populations, and other populations. At present, I have not brought those things together, but I think that is a really excellent point, Danny.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a great, interesting way to combine these two subjects. There's so many ways that these subjects can combine and actually affect each other.
Hmm.
Because a lot of it can be interconnected, and I think that's a great point. So thank you so much, Danny.
Yeah,
Let's
thank you, Danny.
see. Caroline Smith says, hi, do you know what the end result will be for your prints, or most of the time, or does it unfold as you go?
Um, I I sometimes have an idea, but there is evolution in all of the work, I think. So sometimes I have a fairly strong idea of what it's going to be. Sometimes there's definitely exploration. The more I'm familiar with a kind of a series or a format, I think the more I have an idea of how it's going to look. And as you can see, I like working within groups or series of works. For me, that's really appealing. So, and maybe it is because as I feel like I'm grappling with these ideas and these visuals, like I have a better handle on how I want the outcome to be. So I guess it's like usually an 80-20. Like I have a kind of an idea, but things change and things evolve, and there are differences at times, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last question we have right here is in regards to the crossover project. As the works were changing hands between artists, how did you all know when the works were done? Alternatively, where are you the last artist the work has traveled to?
Yeah, that's a great question. Uh, that it was like it. That's a great question, because that was something I think we all grappled with at times. It was easier to manage in the moments when we were all together, um, because we could have a conversation. So when we were all together in Kansas City, or when we were all together in Bellingham, and we were working on these pieces, we could kind of discuss them together, and different people would say, I'm gonna like, I want to do something to this one, and other people would be like, no, I think, like, we could agree, like, that one definitely looks done. We never really had any arguments or anything, but it is an interesting question. in terms of when they were done. We didn't really have any set requirements. Like, we didn't require that like everyone had to work on everything, and a lot of people had their own inherent imagery. Like, Miguel had a lot of viral imagery, and Patricia had her kind of imagery. So it was also really interesting to kind of like try to dissect it when it was on the wall, because it'd be like, oh yeah, like I see that, and I see and I see that, and that's Melanie's, like you could kind of see stuff. So so it was usually like a decision between at least two people. I think early on when it was just Miguel and I, like I would make things and send them to him, and he would make things and send them to me, and we would generally try to finish them after a couple of exchanges. Like, we didn't belabor it back and forth too many times. And yeah, and the last place was when it came here. So I mean, I'm hoping to maybe create another iteration. I know Miguel was trying to create an exchange in China, and I'm not sure what happened with that. There was an artist who was interested, but I don't think it came to be. And then, of course, with the pandemic, we haven't really furthered it. It was really great when I brought everything to Bellingham, but it was definitely a significant amount of work to create opportunity, to have the space in the gallery, to do fundraising and bring all those people here. It was really great for the students, though, because we had all these visiting artists, we had all these people here. You could watch people, come and talk with them in the gallery in a more informal setting while people were working. So it was really great, but it definitely took a lot of investment of time and energy. So I guess it's in a kind of a hold right now, but it could, I mean, there's a lot of work, and it could just like go somewhere else. And then I know I have some things that I'm supposed to be working on.
Yeah.
That, I'm just like, yeah, when I have some time, I'll like work on those. But that's kind of how it goes. So if someone else wants to take it up and bring it somewhere else, that'll happen. Or maybe I'll do it again here when I feel like there's a good opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like just COVID in general has just really hurt collaboration, especially across the board. And another question that's more along this line of challenging is that what's the most challenging thing you might have had while collaborating or in a cooperative project, if there was any challenging parts? So I guess this goes along the line of what we are just discussing.
Sure. Well, I guess I would have to say I think collaboration is really great, and I would encourage all students to try it, especially maybe when you're stuck, or maybe after you graduate and you're looking for things to do, because it's really nice to work with another person, and then they get your work out there too. So it's not just what you do for your work. It starts to kind of build and create momentum, and then other people are invested in the work, and it's this shared thing. So yeah, there's definitely some challenging things, but I think that like the benefits are more greater than any of the challenging parts, personally. I think the challenging parts are just not knowing. I mean, if you really can't handle like not knowing or feeling super precious about something, it may not work for you. But if you can feel like you can like let go of the image and let someone work on top of your image or work on top of someone else's images, then I would consider it. And maybe just start small with one other person. But I think collaborations can be great. Collaborative galleries also, I think, are really great, because people promoting other people's work. So you just build more steam and more power with more people doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I absolutely found that such a true statement as while you're collaborating, you can find such great outlets throughout the entire group you're in collaborating, even if it's just one other person. And just collaborating in general is just a great way to get yourself out there and spread out. We have like one last question
Okay.
from Danny. Your daughter's sticker stamping on the Pile It On series was so fun. I'm curious to know if your daughter has continued to make her own art as she's grown up.
Yeah. So she has gotten really into fiber art lately. So she's doing lots of quilting and like punch needle stuff. She's not as into drawing and painting. I mean, she does a little bit of that, but she's not as interested in that. And it's funny, someone asked her the other day, because a lot of people said, well, this is a collaboration. And I would be like, well, it's kind of a collaboration, but I never always called it a collaboration because it didn't really seem like that was totally fair to her, because she was just like doing these things. You know, she was 3 and she didn't have control. So I felt like it wasn't really a partnership in that way. You know, I never wanted to do anything that she was opposed to, and I don't think I ever did. But someone asked her the other day, like, how do you feel about this work? Do you feel like a collaborator? And it was interesting they asked her that now that she's older. And she said that when she was little, she really did. And she was like really proud of it and really happy with it. And now that she's older, I think she's like less invested in it. She doesn't remember it as much, and it doesn't seem to be like a huge thing to her anymore, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
But she's very artistic. She is. She's kind of taken up her own niche with fiber arts. So
that's amazing. That's a great route to go. So I think that was our last question of the night. So it's about time to wrap it up. Do you have any last parting thoughts or anything you would like to say before we go?
Well, I'm just really happy that you asked me to speak. I love all these questions. I think there is another question at the bottom from Elysium. I could answer that if there's time.
Yeah, go ahead.
They want to know how we came up with the idea, and was it hard to merge our themes and styles together? Our styles are pretty different, but I think we'd known each other and we're good friends, and so we just we appreciated each other's work, even though our work wasn't really like each other. And so even though I don't know if it really like it merges, maybe it complements each other is a better word. But it happened really organically. It didn't really happen as a like, I have this amazing concept idea. It just sort of happened organically. And, you know, I think maybe Miguel gave me some pieces to work on, and then I gave him some pieces to work on. And then we just kind of, we just developed from there. So it wasn't really a planned thing. It was more of a spontaneous thing. And then it became more of a planned thing as it got bigger.
Amazing. That's great. Well, I guess it's just about time to wrap it up. I want to just say personally, thank you so much for doing this with us and from joining our institution in this Visiting Artist Lecture series. You've been such a joy to have, and I can't wait to see more work from you soon. And it's been such a great time getting to know you, meet you more over Zoom.
Yeah, thank you, Cody. And I'm really looking forward to meeting with the other graduates tomorrow and the class tomorrow. I really enjoyed all my individual talks with the students today. So I'm really looking forward to meeting more of you tomorrow.
Amazing. Thank you so much again. This has been fantastic. I can't wait to see you soon.
Thank you.
So
thank you so much.
You have a great night.
You too.
You.
Good night.
Good night.